Americans or even overseas, I can tell you, as much accept as you are, and as much as you probably know all the right terminology, even in school you've already learned these things, when a child actually discloses something to you, it's very, very confronting. And it's usually shocking. Like, you're usually like, no, like, this is not for real. Like, this actually happens to people. But unfortunately, like, numbers show, and the reason why we have to talk about this is because there are children out there suffering, and we're going to be in a position, hopefully, to be able to be that support that they need. So knowing that it's shocking and kind of preparing yourself is so important before you walk into it, that you actually know how to respond properly. Because there's some little things, like I was at a session last year for parents at the school range, and they just said like little words like, sometimes parents would be like, well, why? Like, so why'd you go there? Like, why'd you go with them? And then they'll get a kid who has worked up so much effort to finally disclose something, so whether it was their parent or their family member or maybe their counselor, at that point, the kid doesn't have the answers to why. They might not have the answers to why because maybe they did something that they thought was wrong to begin with, and they're nervous that they're going to get in trouble now. They might not have the answers to why because maybe they don't even understand why they trusted this person. Or they're always told not to do something, and then they went ahead and did it. And they just recently did this whole study with kids and candy, and I'm sure you've all heard these kind of ideas, and stranger danger, like that terminology, and the kids went through a 6-week from the first day of school, 6 weeks in, 6 weeks, every single day they were talking to kids about stranger danger. Very young children. And then 6 weeks in, they took the kids to the Kohl's equivalent. It was in America. They took all the kids to Kohl's. There were, I believe, like first grade, second grade kids. They had people who were in different aisles that were planted there, and they were given candies and said, go up to the kid and try to distract them. And every single one of those children that had spent 6 weeks straight on an intensive kind of course in school to teach them all these things ended up following. So as much as our kids are trained with stranger danger and all that kind of stuff, people make mistakes. Kids are not, you know, they can't see past the candy sometimes, or it's an adult that's weaned and the different types of terminology that when she introduced us to, you probably learned when you were doing the online course, which is, remember? Grooming, okay? So those are the indications that something might be a bit off if somebody's constantly offering them gifts or doing things in a private way and giving them lots of attention in an unhealthy way. So these things kind of lead a kid to become very vulnerable. So with all these setups, our response, whether we're going to be asking kids, why'd you let him, or why'd you go with him, that little terminology, why, this woman who was speaking to us told us, actually took this kid and closed them up and just put them back in a position they were never going to disclose something again. It took a long time until they can actually continue that conversation. Okay, so our response is crucial. Let's go through the 5 points, and then we'll go through questions. The first one is validate. When a child actually shares something, we're in the blue one. When a child actually shares something, it is so important to not express alarm. This is what Connor mentioned before. Like, us staying home is going to completely change how they feel. If you're giving them a like,
what if
kind of like a hard face? I'm sorry? Okay, so that's a good question. We're going to get into that. Let's first go through the typical scenario. The kid's sharing something with you about an experience they have. We'll get to the next one about believing and not believing in general. Forget about hypochondriac. Story might sound off. So, your facial expressions, if you tell me a gruesome story, I'd probably start really like, you know, your face naturally kind of contorts and you just might feel horrible for the kid and it'll show on your face. But your response and your alarm can very much affect what else they're going to continue saying and also how they're going to feel about themselves. So to try to really make sure your face is supported, I'm so proud of you for telling me. We're going to go through exact words to say, but really to try to hide and conceal alarm, disgust, and what might be a natural reaction. Sympathy is a really good thing, and we're going to talk about how exactly to say it. Like when you're sympathizing, it's more about like that encouraging kind of sympathy. And use an empathetic tone, which is sympathy, to help them feel comfortable talking to them, listen very openly and calmly, and actually really try not to judge them because, like Dina said, this was a kid coming from, whether it was a stepfather or whatever case it was that she was referring to. I had people who were dealing with their own siblings, and when I was growing up in school, girls went through so many different things. It's so important not to judge what different people go through, and when you're listening, really trying to feel for like, wow, this person went through something, but not to scare them with an alarmed face and reaction. The second thing is what Moshka brought up a second ago. Believe what they tell you. It is so important to assure a child that you believe them and not to be asking, I'd say even any questions at this point, not to be asking questions that might insinuate that you don't, not to really asking anything, just keep encouraging them to speak and tell them how proud you are or whatever they shared, and to assure them that you believe them and you've heard them and you're so proud that they told you. And obviously there's a lot of stories that happen whether it's true or not, right? But the one thing I can tell you, the likelihood of a child, okay, now it depends on the ages obviously, the likelihood of somebody fabricating a story about something that somebody did to them we'd say hopefully is highly unlikely unless they have big issues like anxiety issues or desperate for attention, maybe it's hypochondriac. There could be different situations that could lead somebody to disclose, we want to say, something that didn't really exist or wasn't exactly the way we were describing it.
It's
but
also
in the event, hold on one second, but in the event that the story did happen, and in the event that it is true, however, you're not the judge, you're not the doctor, you're not the psychologist, we don't know. The support that you're going to give them with assuring them they believe is going to be far less detrimental than if this was a real story that had happened. A kid worked up the courage to tell you, and they were able to read from your face, your body language, your response, that you don't really believe them. If something's not believed, then unfortunately lots of things happen, or a kid says, you know, we were discussing this by Maishi's class, somebody, whether he was describing a story with changing a bathing suit, it could be giving a back massage, or chills, it could be anything. You know, we want to put ourselves in a position, we'll get to the pink form, to put in a position to avoid those kind of scenarios, but there could be such a situation, right? That it might be a hypochondriac, it might be somebody who's just trained to be on the alert, or whatever the terminology is, or who knows why kids do things, maybe they're looking for attention. But that can be cleared up with all the right authorities. But if somebody is sharing something with you, if something did happen, your distrust at that point can turn the entire story into either something that they're going to feel like, oh, I knew nobody would believe me. Like, there's no way, that guy's so nice, everybody knows. Or she's, you know, part of my family, nobody's ever going to believe it. And they finally, and most of the time they're not walking around telling their story to the whole wide world, if they haven't gotten the support they need. And if they are, you probably knew about this to begin with, they come with past or something. Not necessarily, but you may. So it's so crucial to actually assure them that you believe them. And the detriments of doing that are going to far outweigh the results otherwise. Leslie wanted to say something, and we'll get to Shasha.
Yeah, it's not your place to like believe them. I'm saying not your place to not believe them. It's up to other people to determine if something really happened or not. But for you, you just have to believe them and leave it to other people to
and they definitely
figure
have
out.
to
And it's more likely that something happened than not.
Unfortunately, looking at statistics, but I'd say just to voice what Leslie said again, it's not your place, so you don't have to worry about it. As long as you're assuring them you believe them, like you might go back to your bunk room with and the doubts that you'll talk to Dina or myself about, that's not for you to worry about now. What you need to worry about is that this kid feels supported with whatever they disclose. Shashi. Okay?
I know this is like severe, but like, what if a child is like cutting herself? Like, what?
Okay, so we're going to continue with the disclosure, and then I'll get into that.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can actually see sometimes. In high school, we were able to see a lot with swimming, stuff like that. Kids are exposed in different kind of ways. Okay, let's get to the third point. The third point is extremely important. And let me just finalize the last point right above. Recognize we can't keep a secret is do not interrogate them. Sometimes you like just want to get as much information because you're just nervous they're going to stop telling you and that you know that this is so important for you to know. But when your questions, whatever you're asking, you're pushing them, might lead them to be quiet and not share something you want to share. Just let them go. Keep encouraging them. An empathetic ear, a supportive ear, assuring them you believe them, and not asking too many questions. We don't know the right questions to ask, and like I said before, the parents who ask why and then really got themselves in trouble. So in our position, all we want to do is be that supportive, empathetic ear and support them in continuing to disclose. Now, what happens with your reaction? So they've told you whatever they've told you. What else about your reaction is so important? So there's one, I'd say probably the first point that most of these kids, and this is when I was going through something as a kid, one of my close friends told us something, and she said, like, this is something that you can't tell, and I swore us into secrecy. And I was in 6th grade then, but I can tell you that was the hardest part after, was that 2 of us as 6th graders had to go and talk to whatever we had to go through and do with our parents' support, but we had promised our friend not to tell. And that's something that I didn't even know as a 6th grader, but we didn't talk to her. It was like really, really traumatic. I'd say traumatizing for her more so than for us. But in a lot of formats, I'd say for all of us, is any person who trusts and relies on an adult and is sharing something that's so personal, and unfortunately can have huge ramifications in their lives. Sometimes kids are taken away from their family. In our story, we knew that there'd be negative ramifications on her life, and that's what made it so difficult, but we still have to tell her, so it's something that has to be stopped. So how you respond is going to be so crucial, and that you don't give any kids false hope. So there's 2 elements. One of them is if they're asking, you said not to tell.
I'm saying, yeah, first thing they're going to tell you is don't tell me.
No to tell anybody. You can't promise or guarantee anybody that you're going to keep it a secret. The one thing you can say, and it's a really hard thing, and you feel like, oh my goodness, but then they're not going to tell me, okay? Is you can keep, and this is what the Jewish Task Force has written, the child's welfare is always a paramount consideration. In order to ensure their safety, you might actually have to tell, and the reality is we're not psychologists, so we're going to probably need to tell. it's likely that the child was going to preface their disclosure by saying, you have to promise me you're not going to tell anybody. And as soon as you hear those words, promise me, no matter what you think they're going to tell you, whether it's something stupid that went on in their bunk that day, or whether it's going to be something more difficult, unfortunately, in their lives, like something they're living with that was going on back home, you can never make such a promise, because the likelihood is that you're going to have to break that promise. And then her whole life was already crumbling, and here you took the trust that she thought she has in you, and she wasn't able to share it. So let's go to the bold part. Explain to the child that you want to help them. This gives you the words, okay? If you look at the bold part. But that